When I stepped into the courtroom that morning, my daughter, Rachel, smirked and leaned over to whisper something cutting to her husband, Greg. But then the judge's eyes widened. His gavel froze mid-air and he muttered, "It's her," as if he'd seen a ghost. The room went so quiet you could hear my heartbeat. None of them knew who I really was until that moment. That trial turned my world upside down. My name is Ellen, and if my story resonates with you, please subscribe to the channel and stay with me for the next one. I'm 67 years old, or at least I was when this all began. Up until a few months ago, I was just a quiet widow, living a life stitched together by small comforts. Every morning I'd wake at 5:30, brew tea in a chipped blue mug my late husband, Tom, gave me for our 25th anniversary, and sit by the bay window, tending to the lavender plants that still carried his memory. It was a simple life, predictable, with routines that held me together after losing him. For 42 years, I'd poured everything into Rachel, my only child. I worked double shifts at a diner, knitted scarves to sell at craft fairs, and skipped meals to save for her college fund, all so she could have the opportunities I never did. When Rachel married Greg, a man whose charm masked a sharp edge, I bit my tongue and opened my home to them every Sunday, setting the table with my best linens and a smile I hoped hid my unease. After Tom passed, I thought Rachel and I would grow closer, leaning on each other through the grief. How wrong I was. Instead, she started pulling away, her visits becoming stiff, her calls rare, her excuses flimsier by the week. The worst moment of my life came on a chilly November evening in 2023. I'd spent hours making Rachel's favorite pot roast, the kind that simmered all day, filling the house with warmth. I laid out the tablecloth Tom and I bought on our honeymoon, even splurged on a bouquet of daisies for the centerpiece. When they arrived, Greg strode in like he owned the place, plopping into Tom's old recliner and flipping on the TV without a word. Rachel, in a sweater I'd knitted her, looked at me with eyes as cold as the frost outside. "Mom, we need to talk," she said. Her voice clipped, like she was reading a script. She perched on the couch, barely touching it, as if she couldn't wait to leave. "Greg and I have decided something. This house is too much for you to handle alone. It's not safe." Greg didn't even look up from the screen. "We found a great assisted living facility," he chimed in, his tone smug. "It's got everything you need, nurses, activities, people your age." The words hit like a slap. This was the house where Rachel learned to walk, where we baked cookies for her school fundraisers, where Tom took his last breath in my arms. Every scuff on the floor, every photo on the wall, held our life's story. "Rachel, this is our home," I said, my voice shaking. "All our memories are here." She didn't even blink. "Memories don't pay bills, Mom," she snapped. "This place is falling apart. You can't keep up with it." Greg smirked, his eyes scanning the room like he was already redecorating. "It's for your own good, Ellen. We'll handle everything. Don't worry." My heart cracked. My daughter, the girl I'd raised with every ounce of love I had, was pushing me out of my home to hand it over to her husband. I fought back tears, refusing to let them see me break. "I need time to think," I whispered, clinging to the scraps of my dignity. Rachel stood, brushing her hands like she'd finished a chore. "There's nothing to think about, Mom. We've already scheduled an appraiser for next week." They left without touching the pot roast, the daisies drooping in their vise, my heart shattered on the table where we once laughed together. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at the framed photos lining the hallway. Rachel as a toddler, Rachel at her high school graduation, Rachel in her wedding dress. In every one, I was there, holding her hand, beaming with pride. How had it come to this? How had my little girl turned into someone who saw me as an obstacle? The days that followed were a blur of humiliation. Greg showed up unannounced with a realtor, a slick man in a navy suit who poked around my home like it was a used car lot. "These walls need repainting," he muttered, scribbling notes. "And the plumbing's outdated. Buyers won't like that." Rachel nodded along, not even glancing at me. Those walls held the pencil marks where we measured her height every year. The pipes were the ones Tom fixed late at night, cursing under his breath, but smiling when he got it right. The realtor's visit wasn't the worst of it. Rachel came back a few days later with glossy brochures for a place called Silver Haven. "It's got a pool, Mom," she said, her voice dripping with false cheer. "And they do crafts on Wednesdays. You'll love it." She handed me a pamphlet with a photo of smiling seniors playing cards. "It's safe, Ellen," Greg added, his tone patronizing. "You can't be trusted to live alone anymore." Safe. I'd lived in this house for 35 years, knew every neighbor by name, and never once felt unsafe. But to them, I was just a problem to be solved. By the next week, they escalated. Greg stormed in with a lawyer, a thin man with a briefcase who didn't bother introducing himself. "Mrs. Ellen, we've prepared the paperwork to transfer the property," he said, sliding a stack of documents across my dining table. "We just need your signature." My stomach dropped. "Transfer? I thought you were selling the house." Rachel avoided my eyes. "We decided to keep it," she mumbled. "It's better for us to hold on to it for the family." That's when it hit me. They weren't just pushing me out. They were stealing my home, the legacy Tom and I built with decades of sweat and love. "I'm not signing anything," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Greg's face twisted, his charm slipping. "Ellen, you're not in a position to argue. Rachel's your only heir, and we're doing what's best for you." He leaned closer, his voice low and menacing. "You forgot to lock the front door last week. Dangerous for someone your age." It was a lie. I'd never forgotten to lock the door in my life. But Rachel nodded, backing him up. "Mom, you're slipping," she said softly, like she was breaking bad news. "We can't risk you hurting yourself." The lawyer cleared his throat. "If you refuse to sign, Mrs. Ellen, we may need to pursue a guardianship hearing. For your own safety, of course." My world tilted. My own daughter was ready to have me declared incompetent to take my home. Greg, the man I'd welcomed as family, was threatening me in my own dining room. I was alone, 67 years old and cornered. "I need a week," I said, my voice barely audible. Greg smirked. "You've got 5 days. Then we'll do what's necessary." When they left, I sank into Tom's recliner and sobbed, the kind of crying that hurts your chest. I wept for the daughter I'd lost, for the home they were ripping away, for the life I thought I'd built. That night I almost gave up. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was too old, too frail, too useless to fight. But something deep inside me flickered, a stubborn spark of pride that wouldn't let me surrender. Not after everything I'd given Rachel. Not after everything Tom and I had built together. The next morning, Rachel showed up alone, carrying a stack of cardboard boxes. My heart leapt, hoping she'd come to apologize, to say she'd changed her mind. Instead, she said, "Mom, I'm here to help you pack. Let's start with your closet." The words cut deeper than anything Greg could have said. I searched her face for the girl I'd raised, but all I saw was a stranger, her eyes empty of warmth. "Rachel, I'm your mother," I pleaded. "Please, don't do this." She didn't meet my gaze. "I'm doing this because I care about you," she said, her voice flat. "You need to be somewhere safe." Care. That word felt like a knife. For hours, she packed my things like they were garbage. My wedding photos, the quilts I'd sewn for her as a child, the teacups Tom and I collected on our trips. "You won't need this old coat," she said, tossing aside the jacket I wore to Tom's funeral. "Please, keep it," I begged, but she'd already stuffed it into a donation bag. My voice didn't matter. My life didn't matter. Then she found my keepsake box, the one with my mother's pearl necklace, Tom's wedding band, and a locket Rachel made me when she was 8. "This should go in a safe," she said, slipping it into her purse. "It's too valuable for a place like Silver Haven." "Those are mine," I said, reaching for her purse. She pulled back, her face hardening. "Mom, you're getting agitated. This is exactly why you can't stay here." That moment broke something in me. Rachel wasn't just gone. She was erased, replaced by this cold woman shaped by Greg's greed. That night, alone in a house half-packed with boxes, I sat on the living room floor, surrounded by the ghosts of my past. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. How had I become invisible? When had I stopped mattering? The next day, Greg showed up with more strangers. Movers this time, ready to catalog my life. "The old lady needs to hurry up," he said to Rachel loud enough for me to hear. "We've got a buyer lined up for Monday." It was Saturday. I had 2 days left in the home where I'd raised my daughter, where Tom and I had dreamed of growing old together. "What if I'm not ready?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Rachel didn't look up from her phone. "The movers will handle it, Mom. Just take what you need." Need. As if a lifetime could be reduced to a suitcase. That afternoon after they left, I wandered the house, touching every surface. Tom's bookshelves, the kitchen counter where we'd rolled out dough, the creaky stair Rachel used to slide down as a kid. In Tom's study, I opened his desk drawer, desperate for something to anchor me to him. There, beneath old receipts and a broken pane, was a leather-bound folder I'd never seen, sealed with a tiny lock. My hands shook as I searched for the key, finally finding it taped inside his favorite novel, a dog-eared copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. When I opened the folder, my breath caught. Inside was a will, dated January 12, 2020, 6 months before Tom's death. It wasn't the will we drafted together years ago. This one was different, and as I read, my world shifted. Tom hadn't just been the steady accountant I'd known. He'd been a quiet genius, investing every spare dollar in properties, stocks, and bonds. The will named me the sole heir to everything, a fortune I never knew existed. Rachel would only inherit a small trust if she cared for me, with love and respect, in my later years. Tom had seen something in Greg I'd ignored, and he'd protected me in ways I couldn't have imagined. There was more. Tom owned the entire apartment complex where Rachel and Greg lived. Their rent, $2,300 a month, paid religiously to a management company, had been deposited into an account I didn't know about. Bank statements showed a balance of $1,400,000, accumulated over the 2 years since Tom's death. I'd been scraping by on a widow's pension while a fortune grew in my name. Tom also held a 15% stake in the tech firm where Greg worked, enough to sway board decisions. There were deeds to 3 other properties, a beach house, a downtown condo, and a plot of land worth $2,800,000. And at the bottom of the folder, a letter in Tom's neat handwriting. "My dearest Ellen, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've found the legacy I built for you. I'm sorry I kept it secret, but I wanted you to have security in your later years. You gave everything for Rachel and me, and I couldn't bear the thought of you ever wanting. I've always had doubts about Greg. His ambition feels dangerous. If Rachel honors you, she'll share in this wealth. If not, you have the power to protect yourself. Use it wisely, my love. Not to destroy, but to defend and to teach. I love you always, Tom." I sat there, surrounded by papers worth millions, crying for the man who'd known me better than I knew myself. Rachel and Greg thought they were stripping me bare, but I held the keys to their world, their home, Greg's job, their future. For the first time, I felt a flicker of power. Monday morning came, gray and damp with drizzle. Rachel and Greg arrived with the movers, expecting to find me defeated, my belongings packed. Instead, I sat in Tom's recliner, sipping tea from my chipped mug, calm as a summer lake. "Mom, what are you doing?" Rachel said, her voice sharp. "The movers are here." I looked up, meeting her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." Greg laughed, a harsh sound. "Ellen, we've been over this. You don't get to decide anymore." I smiled, a small, steady thing. "Actually, Greg, it's you who doesn't get to decide." Rachel frowned, stepping closer. "What are you talking about?" I took another sip of tea. "I found something interesting about my finances this weekend. You'll see soon enough." Greg's smirk faltered and Rachel's eyes darted to him, uncertain. "Mom, stop playing games," she said. "The movers have other jobs. Then they can leave," I said. "Nothing's moving today." Greg's face reddened. "You're not in charge here, Ellen. We're doing this for your own good." I stood, walking to Tom's desk, and pulled out a single document, the deed to their apartment complex. "Did you know your rent, $2,300 a month paid to Horizon Properties, has been going straight to me for 3 years? Because I own your building, The silence was thick enough to choke on. Rachel's mouth opened, but no words came. Greg snatched the deed, his hands trembling as he read. "This is fake," he spat. "You're living on scraps. There's no way." I handed him another paper, a bank statement showing $1,400,000. "Verify it if you like. My lawyer, Susan Carter, can confirm everything." Rachel sank onto the couch, her face pale. "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" "Because I didn't know until Saturday," I said. "Tom kept it secret to protect me. Turns out he was smarter than all of us." Greg paced, his voice rising. "This changes nothing, Rachel. If she owns the building, she can't just evict us," I cut in. "Oh, I can, and I will, unless you start treating me with respect." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, we're family. You can't do this. Family?" I said, my voice sharp. "Like when you lied about my memory to steal my home, or when you packed my mother's necklace like it was junk." Greg tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand. "I also own 15% of your company, Greg. One call to your CEO, and we'll see how secure your job is." His face went ashen. "You're bluffing." "Try me," I said, my voice steady as stone. Rachel sobbed, but I wasn't done. "You have 30 days to find a new place. After that, I don't want to see you here unless it's to apologize." Greg stormed out, slamming the door. Rachel stayed, her tears falling silently. "Mom, I'm sorry," she whispered. "Greg said you were a danger to yourself." I believed him. "You believed him over me," I said, the hurt raw in my voice. "You let him turn you into someone I don't recognize." She reached for my hand, but I pulled back. "I need time, Rachel. You broke something that can't be fixed with words." She nodded, her face crumpling, and left, the weight of her betrayal hanging between us. The next week was quiet, but heavy. Rachel stayed in a hotel, texting me apologies I wasn't ready to answer. I spent hours with Susan, my lawyer, sorting through Tom's empire. $4,200,000 in assets, from the apartment complex to the beach house. Each document was a reminder of Tom's love, his foresight, his trust in me. I wasn't just a widow anymore. I was a woman with power, and I had to decide how to use it. One evening, Rachel showed up alone, her eyes red. "Mom, I'm leaving Greg," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm pregnant, and I don't want my child growing up with a man like him." The news hit me like a wave. Pregnant. My daughter, carrying my grandchild, and she hadn't told me until now. "Is it true?" I asked, my voice softer than I meant it to be. She nodded. "I wanted to tell you differently, to make it special. But everything's such a mess." I remembered Tom's letter, not to hurt, but to teach. A baby didn't erase the pain she'd caused, but it changed the stakes. "Congratulations," I said, my tone guarded. "But this doesn't undo what you did." She wiped her eyes. "I know. I just want a chance to make it right." I looked at her, searching for the girl I'd raised. "You can stay here tonight," I said finally. "But earning my trust will take more than promises." She nodded, pulling out the keepsake box from her purse. "I brought this back," she said, placing my mother's necklace in my hands. My fingers closed around it, the familiar weight grounding me. "Thank you," I said, my voice catching. "We'll talk more tomorrow." The weeks that followed were tentative, like walking on new ice. Rachel stayed in her old bedroom, its walls still papered with her teenage posters. She started small, washing dishes, tending the lavender, asking about my day. Slowly, I saw glimpses of the daughter I'd lost, but I kept my guard up. Trust is a fragile thing, and she'd shattered it too deeply for quick fixes. One morning, as I sipped tea by the window, Rachel sat across from me, her hands cradling her growing belly. "I've been thinking about everything," she said. "I let Greg control me because it was easier than standing up to him. I blamed you to avoid facing my own mistakes." Her honesty surprised me. "Why didn't you tell me he was like this?" I asked. She sighed. "He said you'd never understand, that you'd push me to leave him." And I was too weak to argue. Her words stung, but they also explained so much. Greg had isolated her, controlled her, turned her against me. "I'm not weak anymore," she said, her voice steady. I'm done letting anyone dictate my life. That was the first time I felt a spark of pride for her, but I didn't say it. Not yet. A month later, Greg made his move. Rachel got a call from the building manager. Greg was in the lobby, demanding to see her, claiming she was being coerced. I went down myself, finding him pacing, his face flushed with anger. "You're brainwashing her, Ellen," he shouted. "I'm calling the cops." I stayed calm. "You're on my property, Greg. Leave, or I'll have you removed." He laughed, bitter and desperate. "You don't own anything. You're a liar." I dialed Susan on speakerphone. "Can you confirm I own 1423 Maple Avenue?" Susan's voice was crisp. "Absolutely, Mrs. Ellen. You're the sole owner per the deed dated March 3rd, 1988. Greg's bravado crumbled. "This isn't over," he muttered, but he left, his threats empty. 2 months later, the trial loomed. Greg had sued for custody of Rachel's unborn child, claiming I'd manipulated her against him. In the courthouse, Rachel clung to my arm, her 6-month belly visible under her navy dress. "What if he wins, Mom?" she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "He won't. We have the truth." Greg's lawyer painted me as a vindictive mother-in-law, using wealth to destroy their marriage. But Susan was ready. She presented texts where Greg demeaned Rachel, voicemails where he threatened to leave if she didn't deal with me, and a neighbor's testimony about his outbursts. Then the judge, a woman with sharp eyes and gray hair, looked at me. "Mrs. Ellen Harper?" she asked, her voice tinged with recognition. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, confused. She smiled faintly. "You don't remember me, do you? I'm Judge Laura Bennett. 30 years ago, you worked at the community center teaching literacy classes. You helped me learn to read when I was a struggling single mother." My breath caught. I vaguely recalled a young woman, determined but shy, who'd thanked me with a handwritten note. "Laura," I said softly. "I remember you." The courtroom stilled. Greg's lawyer objected, citing bias, but Judge Bennett shut him down. "There's no conflict here, only justice." She turned to me. "Your kindness changed my life, Ellen. I never forgot it." The verdict was swift. Greg lost all custody rights, was ordered to pay legal fees, and received a restraining order. As we left, Rachel hugged me tightly. "How did she know you, Mom?" "Life has a way of circling back," I said, smiling. Kindness leaves echoes. 6 months later, Rachel gave birth to a daughter, Lily, with Tom's bright eyes and my stubborn chin. Watching Rachel become a mother, gentle, fierce, present, eased some of the scars she'd left. One evening, as we sat in the garden, Lily asleep in her stroller, Rachel asked, "Have you forgiven me, Mom?" I looked at her, this woman who'd fought her way back to herself. "I'm getting there," I said. "But you've learned what matters. That's enough for now." That night I sat with my chipped mug, staring at the lavender plants glowing under the moonlight. Tom's letter had guided me, not to destroy, but to protect and teach. Rachel had learned, and I'd found strength I didn't know I had. Some victories come slowly, but they're worth the wait. Over the next few years, Rachel and I rebuilt our bond step by cautious step, as she proved her remorse through actions, caring for me, for Lily, and for herself. I channeled Tom's legacy into creating Haven of Hope, a foundation to support women facing familial betrayal, pouring my heart into helping others reclaim their strength. 5 years later, life looks different. Lily, now 4, races through the garden, her laughter filling the air. "Grandma Ellen, look!" she calls, holding up a dandelion. Rachel, now a financial advisor, smiles from the porch, her confidence restored. One afternoon, Judge Bennett visited, now retired, her warmth unchanged. "You're doing incredible work, Ellen," she said. "You've turned pain into purpose." I thanked her, but the real reward was the peace in my home, the love in Lily's eyes, the strength in Rachel's voice. As I tucked Lily into bed that night, she asked for the brave grandma story. I told it, weaving in the judge who helped defeat the dragon. "Happily ever after?" Lily asked. "Happily ever after," I said, kissing her forehead. "I'd found mine, against all odds. If my story touched you, Please share your own in the comments below. And if you believe in second chances, subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like mine waiting to be told.